Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
Beach FM, and yet another beautiful day, and to make it even better, it's my pleasure to welcome to the program Ralph McAlister. Good morning, Ralph.
And a lovely day it's going to be, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We've been spoiled recently. Wonderful. Have you been spoiled in a literary sense as well?
I've been pretty lucky. This one that I'm going to talk to your listeners about now is going to be one of the top books of the year. And I've had about 3 of them, or 4 perhaps, already this year. So I'm not trying to hedge my bets, but this is called Hamnet, with an N, Hamnet. Mm-hmm. And it's the story of Anne Hathaway, who was called Agnes by her family.
Yes.
And it's the story of her life in 16th century Stratford and around. But I have to rush in and tell you listeners, it's so exciting. It's written by Maggie O'Farrell, who's got, I think 6 or 7 novels to her name, and she's mixed up historical and modern. But this is deeply historical, and it's about Agnes and her bringing up 3 children, one of whom, Hamnet, died when he was 11 years old. This is true.
Yes.
And so Hamnet was an interchangeable name with Hamlet by all accounts in 16th century. Mm-hmm. So you could have been called Hamlet, and people might call you Hamlet, just mix them up. But we've got Anne, who's actually called Agnes in the book, the novel. She is the wife, the husband, the partner of Will Shakespeare, who doesn't come into the story at all, except as a visitor. And of course, she had her first child out of wedlock. This is true too. Mm. And then she had Hamnet and Judith, the twins, true. And Agnes was a bit of a witch, really. She loved the environment. She was very, very much into physics and being the physician with all sorts of herbs and so on. And of course, the whole story revolves around that time when the plague was hitting all over Europe. And of course, it brings a different resonance to any novel that's been written recently when you have this part of the book where one of the children, Judith, the twin of Hamnet, develops symptoms of the plague. And Hamnet sort of takes over and dies in her place. I'm not telling you anything that will spoil the reader's interest, because it's a wonderful story. It's heartrending. When I finished it, I really had to sort of wipe the tears from my eyes. It's a story about grief and death, and it's beautifully researched. It's exquisitely sort of staging the realization of why Hamlet, the play, was written 4 years, literally 4 years after Hamnet, his son, died. So, and of course it's all a fiction in terms of why this or how this, but the actual facts are completely real, completely true, and that gives it an extra edge of wonderful sort of novel focus and strength. And I was deeply impressed, and I sent it off to a friend of mine who's a bit sad at the moment, and it certainly won't cheer her up, but she'll love the actual story. And I do recommend it to your readers and listeners, because it's just come out. We've just got the copies after the lockdown and so on. And I would think it will be bought, I hope, in your local bookshop, like Paper Plus, as soon as possible, because it's a real hit.
Look, it sounds absolutely fascinating. And don't you have to admire the skill of people who can reconstruct a life having just a very, very slim outline, those few facts that you outline there, and you're filling the gaps, and you are recreating a person. This is a major achievement, isn't it?
Well, I think so. And of course, if you've got somebody as skillful as O'Farrell you know, she makes you almost smell the parts of the countryside. She loves the village atmosphere of where she's living, and you can see and hear the noises, and it's just so beautifully recreated, and the research, which is never cumbersome. I think occasionally she says 3 words instead of 1. I think it's a bit overwritten, some of her descriptive passages, but then that in no way decries from the quality of this novel, and I would recommend it to anybody who loves reading and who loves the whole 16th century details about survival, about love, and how they did things in those days.
Yes.
And of course, as a sort of a pseudo-historian myself, I was totally rapt.
Oh, that's wonderful. And one final thing, you say that she was a bit of a witch. Now, I assume this is in the best context of that word, back in the days when a witch was a bit of a cross between an apothecary and a soothsayer.
Exactly what she was. And people would come up to her door. She wouldn't have let them in the house, but they would knock on the window and they would tell her what was wrong with their leg or their head or their bowel or whatever. And she would go and mix up a remedy or a sort of, not necessarily a cure, but she would say, take this when you go home. She wouldn't take money, and she had lots of hair everywhere, so that made people, I don't call her a witch, but the people in the story do. Yes. But she was a good witch. She wasn't, you know, she's like, isn't it Sondheim? He talks about witches can be kind and giants can be nice, you know, in Into the Woods. So, yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's just wonderful that we have talented English people, Irish people, who write these marvellous stories for us to enjoy. So get out and buy the book, please, for not you, but, you know, your listeners.
I'm very tempted. Thank you so much for joining us and piquing our interest once again. Ralph McAlister, thank you for your company, sir.
You're welcome.
106.3 Beach FM.